Have you ever imagined that one day Europe could become hotter than places people usually associate with extreme heat? Sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? But that's exactly what's happening. Right now, millions of people across Europe are facing temperatures so high that schools have closed, wildfires have spread across forests, roads have started to crack under intense heat, and even rivers have dropped to unusually low levels in some regions. And here's the shocking part. This is not just another hot summer. Scientists say these extreme heat waves are becoming more frequent and more intense than they were decades ago. So the real question is not, why is Europe hot today? The real question is, how did an entire continent slowly reach this point? Because believe it or not, this story didn't begin this year or even begin 10 years ago. To understand what's happening today, we have to go back. Let's travel back to the 1970s. Back then, Europe looked very different. Summers were warm, but dangerous heat waves were much less common than they are today. In many European countries, people didn't even think about installing air conditioners in their homes because they rarely needed them. Life followed a predictable rhythm. Winter brought snow, spring brought rain, summer brought sunshine, and autumn cooled everything down again. It felt like nature had its own timetable. But quietly, something invisible had already begun to change. A change that almost nobody can see with their own eyes. Every day, factories released smoke, cars burned fuel, power plants produced electricity by burning coal, oil, and natural gas. At the time, these were signs of progress, growing economies, better transportation, modern lifestyles. Almost no one imagined that these everyday activities were slowly changing the atmosphere surrounding our planet. Not overnight, not in a single year, but little by little, year after year, like filling a glass with water, one drop at a time, until one day the glass becomes full. And that's when the real problems begin. The atmosphere acts like Earth's blanket. It naturally keeps some of the sun's heat trapped, making life possible. But as greenhouse gases increased, that blanket became thicker. More heat stayed inside, less escaped back into space. The result? The entire planet slowly started getting warmer. At first, the increase seemed tiny, just fractions of a degree, so small that many people ignored it. But nature notices even the smallest changes. And over time, those tiny changes began creating much bigger consequences. For years, the warning signs were there. Scientists published reports. Temperature records kept breaking. Glaciers slowly melted. Rainfall patterns changed. But most people believed everything would stay under control. They were wrong. Because then came the heat waves that changed Europe forever. One summer felt a little hotter than the last. A new temperature record was set. People called it just another unusually hot year. Then another record was broken. And another, and another. At first, it didn't seem like a pattern, but to scientists, it was becoming impossible to ignore. Something was changing, and it was changing faster than expected. Then came the year 2003, a summer that Europe would never forget. A powerful heat wave swept across much of the continent. Temperatures remained dangerously high for days. Hospitals became overwhelmed. Thousands of vulnerable people, especially the elderly, lost their lives. It was one of Europe's deadliest natural disasters in modern history. For many scientists, this was no longer just another heat wave. It was a warning of what a warming planet could bring. But the warning wasn't enough. Years passed, and the heat kept coming back. Almost every summer seemed to bring another record. Longer heat waves, hotter days, warmer nights. And that's important. Because when temperatures stay high even after sunset, the human body doesn't get a chance to recover. That makes heat waves even more dangerous. Then something else started happening. The land itself began to change. Weeks without rain turned green fields into dry grass. Forests became like piles of dry wood, waiting for a single spark. And sometimes that's all it took. One lightning strike, one small accident, one unattended fire. Within hours, entire hillsides were burning. Wildfires that once happened occasionally started becoming much more common in parts of southern Europe. Firefighters fought day and night. Some villages had to be evacuated. People watched helplessly as flames consumed forests that had stood for centuries. And the heat wasn't only affecting forests. Europe's rivers also began showing signs of stress. In several regions, water levels dropped during prolonged hot and dry periods. Farmers struggled to irrigate their crops. In some places, water itself started becoming a growing concern. Think about that for a second. A continent famous for its rivers, now worrying about having enough water. And then, the impossible happened. Temperatures crossed 40 degrees Celsius in countries where many people had never imagined experiencing such extreme heat. Schools closed. Outdoor work was restricted in some places. Tourist attractions emptied during the hottest hours of the day. Even locals began saying, "This doesn't feel like the Europe we grew up in." But here's the biggest question of all. If Earth has always experienced hot summers, why are today's heat waves becoming more intense? Or is there something else happening above Europe that most people have never heard about? Because the answer is far more fascinating than you might think. So, why is Europe getting so hot? Is it just because the sun has become stronger? No. The sun shining on Europe today isn't dramatically different from what it was decades ago. The real change is happening much closer to Earth, and most of us can't even see it. Imagine this. On a cold winter night, you wrap yourself in a thick blanket. The blanket doesn't create heat, it simply stops your body heat from escaping. Now imagine, Earth is wearing a blanket too. That blanket is called the atmosphere. For millions of years, it kept our planet at just the right temperature for life to exist. But over the last century, humans have been adding more and more greenhouse gases into that blanket. Carbon dioxide, methane, and other gases. These gases trap more of the sun's heat before it can escape back into space. The blanket becomes thicker, and Earth slowly becomes warmer. Not because the sun changed, but because more of its heat stays trapped. But here's where the story becomes even more surprising. If global warming affects the whole planet, why does Europe seem to be suffering so much? The answer is because several different events are happening at the same time, and together they create the perfect conditions for extreme heat. The first reason is dry land. When soil contains water, part of the sun's energy is used to evaporate that moisture. That process naturally helps cool the ground. But after weeks without rain, the soil dries out. Now, almost all of the sun's energy goes directly into heating the land, which means the ground becomes much hotter. The hotter it gets, the drier the land becomes. And then, there's another powerful factor: hot air moving north from the Sahara Desert. During certain weather patterns, very warm air from North Africa can spread into southern and western Europe. When that hot air combines with already dry land and a persistent heat dome, the result can be extreme temperatures. This doesn't happen every summer in exactly the same way. But when these conditions line up, Europe can experience some of its most intense heat waves. And cities? They make things even worse. Think about the last time you walked barefoot on grass, and then on concrete. Which one felt hotter? Asphalt. Buildings. They absorb heat all day long. Then, even after the sun goes down, they slowly release that heat back into the air. This is known as the urban heat island effect. That's why big cities often stay much hotter than nearby rural areas, especially at night. Now think about everything we've talked about: a warming planet, dry soil, heat domes, hot air from North Africa, cities trapping heat. None of these factors alone explain every heat wave, but together they can turn a normal summer into a dangerous one. And here's the scary part. Scientists say these conditions are becoming more likely as the climate continues to warm, which raises an even bigger question. What could Europe look like 10, 20, or even 50 years from now? The answer might surprise you. So, what happens next? Will Europe eventually cool down again? Or is this only the beginning? To answer that, let's look at what scientists are actually saying. Not opinions, not social media, but years of climate research. And what they found is both fascinating and worrying. If greenhouse gas emissions continue at a high level, scientists expect Europe to experience more frequent and more intense heat waves in the coming decades. That doesn't mean every single summer will break records. Weather naturally changes from year to year. Some summers will still be cooler than others, but overall, the trend points upward. In simple words, the odds of extreme heat are increasing. Now imagine this. It's the year 2035. You're walking through a European city. The temperature is above 40 degrees Celsius. The streets are nearly empty. Most people stay indoors during the afternoon. Construction workers begin their shifts before sunrise. Because working later in the day has become too dangerous. Schools adjust their schedules. Outdoor sports are canceled. Hospitals prepare for another wave of heat-related illnesses. This isn't a movie. Some of these changes are already happening in parts of Europe during severe heat waves. But before you think, so there's nothing we can do, there's something important you should know. The future has not been fully written. Scientists agree on one key point. The amount of future warming depends significantly on how much greenhouse gas humanity emits from now on. The choices made today can influence the climate decades from now. That's why countries around the world are investing in renewable energy, improving public transport, planting more trees, developing cleaner technologies, and trying to reduce emissions. The goal isn't to stop summer. The goal is to stop extreme heat from becoming the new normal. So, the question isn't, can Europe survive another heat wave? It probably can. The real question is, how many more record-breaking summers can it handle before today's emergency becomes tomorrow's normal life? Let's be honest. Europe isn't the first place to experience extreme heat. And sadly, it won't be the last. But what makes Europe's situation so important is that it shows us something much bigger. Climate change isn't a prediction anymore. It's something people are experiencing in real life, not in the future, today. Every record-breaking temperature, every wildfire, every drought, every shrinking glacier is another reminder that our planet is changing, and it's changing faster than many people expected. But here's something that often gets misunderstood. People ask, can we stop climate change? The truth is, we can't instantly reverse everything that's already happened. But according to scientists, we can slow the rate of future warming by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to changing conditions. That means the decisions made today still matter. The future isn't fixed. Now imagine two different futures. Countries continue investing in cleaner energy. Cities become greener. Buildings are designed to stay cooler. Forests are protected. Technology becomes more efficient. Communities prepare for extreme weather. Heat waves may still happen, but societies become better prepared to deal with them. Now imagine another future. Very little changes. Emissions remain high. Heat waves become more frequent. Droughts last longer. Water becomes harder to manage. Wildfires grow larger. And every new summer, people begin asking the same question. Is this the hottest year yet? The future depends on choices, not just from governments, not just from scientists, but from businesses, communities, and millions of ordinary people around the world. Because climate doesn't recognize borders. What happens in one part of the world can affect another. So, the next time you hear that Europe is facing another record-breaking heat wave, remember, that headline isn't just about Europe. It's part of a much bigger story, a story that's still being written. And believe it or not, we're all part of it. When future generations look back at this moment, they probably won't ask, how hot was Europe in 2026? They'll ask something much more important. When the warning signs became impossible to ignore, what did humanity choose to do? Maybe the answer to that question starts today. If you enjoyed this video and want more fact-based stories about our planet, science, and the future of humanity, make sure to subscribe, because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that are completely real.